All right, welcome back everybody to Bear's Guide with a 5 for another fantastic lesson today. Very excited for this one, something I really love talking about because it affects us so much constantly. And it really is the current state we are in with the world and the global economy and trade and all of that stuff. But today we are focusing on the International Division of Labor. And we have touched on this throughout the entire year, but now we're actually putting the name to the face to understand this concept. The question I want to start with are how are LDCs, or the developing world, affected by factories from MDCs, or the developed world? Now, by now, you should have already talked about or gone over maquiladoras, these American factories in Mexico that take advantage of different site and situation factors to make the most money they can. But now we are taking it a step further and looking at factories from MDCs around the entire world and what impact does that have. So that's what we're going to be further exploring in this video. As I mentioned, this is the new International Division of Labor because before this, everything was made inside of one country. The raw materials were collected in that country, it was manufactured in that country, and it was sold in that country. Maybe it expanded a little bit with getting the raw materials from another country, shipped to the country that then makes it and sells it. But now we live in a globalized society where we get resources from one country, we ship it around the world to another country, which then makes it and then ships it to the developed world. Let's go a little more in depth. So we have to start with transnational corporations, and they are exactly what it sounds like. Transnational corporations are corporations which have offices in multiple countries to take advantage of the site factors. The trans means across. It's pretty straightforward. Now the site factors, remember, our three site factors are land, labor, and capital. And companies are going to take advantage of all of these things around all corners of the world to make the most money possible by making their goods as cheap as possible to produce. So transnational corporations take advantages of site factors by placing their offices in countries where they can get good deal on land, labor, and capital. And we talked a little about this with the maquiladoras, right? They take advantage of the land because it's cheap and there's infrastructure there. They take advantage of the labor because they can find cheap labor. And they get all those sweet tax breaks and don't have to pay tariffs when they transport goods. Now, transnational corporations also take advantage of site factors in the more developed world too. They find, think of Amazon. When Amazon has to place its headquarters, they want to take advantage of the cheap, affordable land, but the labor they're looking for, they need intelligent, skilled workers, and they want to get tax breaks too, even in the developed world. So the International Division of Labor is part of this global economy where we have shifted all the low-skill, low-wage Fordist jobs into the developing world, while the high-skill, high-wage post-Fordist jobs are done in MDCs. Because if you look around the United States, how many factories are there? How many people do you know wake up every day and go work in a factory? None. Because we have deindustrialized. We have sent all those jobs to other countries that are willing to do it for a whole lot cheaper. It's the work that we don't want to do. And then we have the question we ask ourselves, well, what are the impacts of this? And how does it affect the workers in the developed world like the United States and throughout Europe? And how does it affect workers in the developing world? How does it affect economies, society, the politics, all this stuff? But in other words, the best ways to think about it is that low-paying jobs were shipped overseas and we keep the good ones. Well, what we think is good. But you also have to consider the sectors of employment when we're talking about the International Division of Labor, because this is all stuff we've learned. We're just putting it into one final understanding of the world. So the MDCs have the tertiary and up jobs. The developing world has the secondary and primary jobs. And we could talk about development theories and how this affects them, so on and so forth. Now let's take a look at an example. Now you saw this graphic when I first pulled up the video. But now we're taking a second look at it again. And notice how batteries are created. So the resources from the batteries start in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's the only place on Earth that has some of these minerals and materials that we use to make batteries. Then it gets shipped to China, where China manufactures it, along with parts of Japan and South Korea, where they make these manufactured products, and then they ship it to the US and Europe. So we're using countries from all around the world to make this final product. And that is cheaper than doing it inside of one country by itself. Whether it's because the land is cheaper, that the minerals are easier to find, that the wages are cheaper, and the people are willing to work for less. And we also have to remember that transportation costs aren't really thought of when we think of the new International Division of Labor, because the other site factors are so cheap that it has created so much profit for these companies that do this. So how do countries take advantage of this idea of the International Division of Labor? Well, they have to use newly industrialized countries. They really are the key to making this happen. They are the step in between that manufactures all the stuff for us in the developed world to enjoy. So first off, newly industrialized countries are those high developing countries that manufacture goods for the developed world. These are our countries where we think, are they developed? Are they developing? I really don't know. They're kind of like the in-between, right? And we have two acronyms to remember. We have BRIC countries and MINT countries. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and MINT is Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. Now, is it great if you memorize all of these countries and that they're high developing countries or newly industrialized countries? Yeah, that'd be amazing. But really just know BRICS, MINT, and maybe pick out like Brazil, Russia, China, India, and Mexico, and you should be good. Now, how do they take advantage of these countries beside the fact that the land is cheap in these countries, that these companies are willing to build infrastructure for these countries, and these countries have a huge pool of labor that is willing to work for not a lot of money, and it doesn't take a lot of training? Well, this is where we get into the kind of confusing tax thing. And this is formed with export processing zones, or EPZs. This is an actual space in the country where there's special rules just for that one spot. This area has special regulations placed on it so foreign companies can build their factories there and reap all the benefits of tax cuts. So right away, most manufacturing is a bulk gaining industry. So they want to be near the airport or a dock or near the border of another country they're shipping to lower those transportation costs to take advantage of those situation factors. But they also get tax cuts on the machinery and raw materials that are sent into the country as long as it's used to produce exports that immediately leave that country, because that's a unique rule. They cannot sell products locally and destroy the markets because the products are so cheap that it would destroy all the local economies. But we ask the question, are these good? And that's a very loaded question, because we say, yes, we get cheaper consumer goods, and yeah, people get jobs in other countries. But are those jobs good paying? Do they care about the workers? Does it undercut the society there? Is it worth giving up the manufacturing jobs in the developed world for tertiary jobs? Do they pay the same? What are the impacts overall on the environment? There's just a lot of questions when it comes to these. So it's something that we can really dig deep in and explore to try and figure out. Some other terms that you're going to hear for these, for EPZs, are also special economic zones or free trade zones, SEZs or FTZs. These are just general terms. They all mean essentially the same thing, so don't get too caught up on them, but College Board does like to use these, especially as we talk more about this International Division of Labor, the globalized economy, and all the other buzzwords they like to use. Finally, how can we apply it to Rostow's and Wallerstein's theory to the IDL? We have talked about the two ways to develop a country, or at least the two main theories on country development. And we can apply it once again to the International Division of Labor, just like we've applied everything else we have learned thus far. So if we were looking at the International Division of Labor and we brought our friend Rostow in, Rostow would probably explain that the stage 2 and 3 countries are doing the raw material and the factory work, while stage 4 and 5 countries do the high-level work, especially that consumer part, right? Those stage 5 countries are marked by mass consumption, which in the International Division of Labor is what the United States and Europe does. They consume what is made in other countries. So Rostow would probably really on board with the idea of the International Division of Labor, because that whole theory was based on trading as a way to develop. So he would love this. He's talking about states buying stuff, states are able to generate money, by generating money that they can develop, and everything is great. And then we get our really pessimistic, cynical friend, Wallerstein, who would be really upset with the international division of labor. He would explain that the countries that harvest the raw materials are in the periphery, the countries that produce the products are in the semi-periphery, and the core countries consume the products. And that would further his idea that the core kind of controls the development of the world and can keep those periphery countries in the periphery because they have those primary jobs harvesting the resources, and they never get a chance to invest in their own country and their own infrastructure to move through the sectors of employment and become a more developed country or a core country. And he would also argue that the semi-periphery countries are only semi-periphery because the core has allowed them to be, by allowing them to make the goods and products that we consume, because the means to produce those things comes from the core countries. When the core country shows up and goes, yeah, I will build this factory, I will build these roads, I will build the dock, I'm going to build the infrastructure, I'm going to invest in the country, I'm going to hire your people. But then they go, but I want a lot of tax cuts. And because they get so many tax cuts, then the government can't get money and invest it into their country and education, healthcare, and so on and so forth. So it's really interesting to take this concept of the international division of labor and apply it to our two theories of development that we had to know. So finally, what to think about. What you have to be able to do by the end of this is define the term transnational corporation. You also have to be able to discuss how transnational corporations take advantage of site factors in newly industrialized countries. And finally, be able to explain how Rostow's model and Wallerstein's world systems theory explains the international division of labor. If you can do these things by the end of this, then you have a very solid understanding of the topic. As always, this is Bear's Guide 205. Make sure you hit that like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell icon to know that when new videos pop up so you can get those notes done early. As always, I look forward to making more videos, and yeah, see you next time.